Why do you walk into the room and check on them before you even take off your coat? Most people would call it a hobby, a habit, maybe a little phase you're going through. And on the surface, that's what it looks like. You bought a plant. You bought another one. You started reading about them. It's fine. But here's the thing. Behind that hobby, there's something deeper that most people miss. Because if your mood tracks with how your monstera is doing, if you've ever moved a pot 2 inches to the left and felt better about your whole day, if you feel a quiet grief when a leaf yellows that you can't quite explain to anyone, you are not just into plants. You aren't projecting. And you definitely aren't crazy. You are experiencing one of the oldest biological arrangements in human history. And if you dismiss it, which most people around you will, you could be missing what your own nervous system has been telling you for years. Let's start with what that strong attachment actually is. 1. It was never just about having something green in the room, so why do people keep bringing more plants home long after they run out of window space? Most people assume it's aesthetic. They look nice. They're calming to look at. But here's the thing. If aesthetic was all you wanted, you'd have a painting. Paintings don't droop. Paintings don't need you. Paintings don't make your chest tighten when you walk past them on a bad day. So why do you keep choosing something that can die? Because the moment you step into a room with a healthy plant, your body starts doing something it can't do on its own. The plant is releasing phytoncides, airborne organic compounds that, according to research by Dr. Ching Li at Nippon Medical School in Tokyo, measurably lower cortisol, drop blood pressure, and shift your nervous system out of fight or flight within minutes. Your plant is not sitting there passively. It is actively changing your biochemistry every time you're near it. And here's what most people don't realize. There's a bacteria called Mycobacterium vaccae that lives in healthy potting soil. When you touch the dirt, when you repot, when you water, researchers at the University of Colorado Boulder found it triggers serotonin release in the brain. The same serotonin antidepressants are trying to help your brain produce. Think about that for a sec. When you feel calmer after 20 minutes with your plants, that isn't in your head. That's a chemical feedback loop that your body has learned to rely on. That's not just a hobby. That's a biological relationship on a level most people never fully realize. And by the way, if you've ever felt a grief over a plant that was disproportionate to what it should feel, a grief that surprised you, maybe even embarrassed you, don't brush it off. We'll get into what that really is at the end. It's something most deeply attached plant people have felt, and very few have a word for it. 2. You're not just taking care of them. You're exchanging signals with them. Have you ever walked into the room and known, before checking, that one of your plants wasn't right? Most people chalk it up to familiarity. You just know your plants, but there's more going on than that. In 2019, researchers at Tel Aviv University published a study showing plants actually respond to airborne vibration, including human voices and human movement. Their stomata, the tiny pores on their leaves, open and close in response to the environment. They adjust transpiration based on humidity, temperature, light, even the CO2 you exhale as you pass them. In other words, your plant is reading you, and you are reading them back, without knowing it. The research on experienced plant owners shows they scan for leaf angle, turgor, color shift, and petiole droop faster than a new owner can even name the parts. You're assessing a dozen variables in half a second every time you walk into the room. You don't think about it. You just do it. That isn't a hobby. That's attunement. That's the same thing a mother does with an infant when she walks into the nursery and knows, before the baby cries, that something's off. Your nervous system has learned to read another living thing's signals, and theirs, in a quieter way, has learned to respond to yours. You aren't just watching them live. You are living with them. You are, quite literally, breathing them in and out of you every minute you're in the same room. That's not just a hobby. That's co-regulation. And hey, if any of this is putting words to something you've felt for years and never said out loud, hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us reach more people who love their plants the way you do. 3. On the darkest days, they are the reason you get up. There is something about deep plant attachment that nobody really talks about, especially for people struggling with depression, anxiety, or burnout. It's the psychology of structure. Mental health struggles feed on inertia. Depression wants you to stay in bed. Anxiety wants you to stay inside. The modern world tells you to stare at a screen for 12 hours. But a plant? A plant operates on an older clock. The sun, the soil, the stomata opening with the morning light. For a lot of deeply attached plant owners, the plants are the scaffolding that holds their week together. On the days when you cannot do it for yourself, you do it for them. You get up. You open the blinds. You check the soil. You carry the watering can across the room. Not because you wanted to, but because they needed it. And here's what nobody tells you. That obligation isn't a burden. It's a lifeline. Because you cannot water a plant in the past. You cannot repot one in the future. A plant forces you to be exactly where they are, in the present moment, paying attention to a living thing that is not on a screen. For a chaotic mind, that forced presence is better than most meditation apps. That's not just a hobby, that's an anchor. And for some people watching this right now, it is not an exaggeration to say the plants are part of what keeps them going. 4. This attachment is 300,000 years old. And here's what makes this even more fascinating. The pull you feel toward your plants isn't modern. It isn't a millennial trend. It isn't the pandemic. It is quite literally in your DNA. In 1984, the biologist E.O. Wilson published the biophilia hypothesis, the idea that humans have an innate, evolved need to affiliate with other forms of life, and with plants especially. Because for most of our species' history, humans who paid close attention to plants, which ones were ripe, which ones were sick, which ones were returning in the spring, were the humans who survived. Think about that for a minute. We are the descendants of people who noticed plants obsessively. The part of you that walks into the room and checks on your fiddle leaf before you take off your coat, that's not modern neurosis. That is a 300,000-year-old pattern recognition system firing in a city apartment. Your brain is doing the thing it was built to do. You were supposed to be tending green things. You were supposed to be reading their health in a glance. You were supposed to feel something when one of them wasn't doing well. So when someone tells you, it's just a plant, why are you so worried about it? What they're really saying is that they don't understand a part of you that is older than language itself. That's not just a hobby. That's ancestry firing in real time. 5. They have seen every version of you. Perhaps the most profound reason for this attachment lies in our oldest, quietest need. The need for a witness. We all have a private self. The version of us that exists when the door is locked. The version that cries at the kitchen sink. The version that dances in socks. The version that got the news and just stood there, staring at nothing for 10 minutes. For most of us, showing that version to another human is incredibly dangerous. Humans judge. Humans offer advice we didn't ask for. Humans get uncomfortable with our pain. But your plants? Your plants are the witnesses to your shadow self. They were in the room when you broke down. They were on the windowsill when you got the call. They were there for the version of you that you would never let another person see. And the miracle is, they kept growing. They didn't flinch. They didn't look away. They didn't ask you to cheer up. They just kept reaching, quietly, toward the light, while your life fell apart and rebuilt itself 5 feet away from them. This creates a kind of psychological safety that is almost impossible to find elsewhere. It is a relationship with zero performance pressure. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be successful. You don't even have to be okay. You just have to be there, and the watering gets done. For someone who spends their whole life managing the expectations of other people, who edits themselves before every conversation, every email, every family dinner, that kind of freedom is addictive. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath for years. That's not just a hobby. That's being seen without being judged, maybe for the first time in your life. 6. You know on some level that it will end. Of course, we cannot talk about strong attachment without talking about the shadow, the price of the ticket. Remember earlier when I said there's a grief some plant people feel that surprises them? A grief disproportionate to what it should feel? This is what I was talking about. If you are deeply attached to a plant, you are constantly living with the quiet, subconscious knowledge of its mortality. Not just that plants sometimes die, everyone knows that, but that this one, the one on your desk, the one you've had for 4 years, the one that survived the move, will not be with you forever. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called anticipatory grief, first described by Dr. Eric Lindemann at Harvard in 1944. It's the grief you feel for a loss that hasn't happened yet, for something you know is temporary but love anyway. For some people, this fear can be paralyzing. It makes you overcheck. It makes you look up yellow leaves at 2 a.m. It makes the idea of an empty shelf feel genuinely unbearable. So why do we do it? Why do we keep bringing living things home that we know could die? Because the trade-off is worth it. Because for 4 years, or 10, or 20, you get to experience a kind of relationship that is entirely unpolluted by human complexity. You get to be a caretaker for something that never judges you. You get to feel, quietly and unshowily, needed. So let's stop apologizing for how much we love them. Let's stop saying it's just a plant. A strong attachment to your plants isn't about avoiding people. It isn't an inability to connect. It's about a need to reconnect with something older than conversation. It's about a need to be near something alive that doesn't require you to explain yourself. In a world that is obsessed with speed, productivity, and noise, your plants are the quiet thing in the room that reminds you you're an animal too. That you need light, that you need water, that you need rest, that you need to be near green things to remember who you are. They are not just decoration. They are the guardians of your nervous system. Because that strong attachment, it was never just a hobby, It was gratitude. Quiet, daily, unspoken gratitude for the only thing in your house that has asked nothing from you except to be paid attention to. And paying attention, as it turns out, is the most ancient form of love there is.